veggies, not your friends. It's not hard to be vegan. The Chickpeeps.
Hello folks, my name's Robbie Jarvis and I would like to welcome you to episode 30 of the Chickpeeps podcast. In just a moment I'm going to be joined by the marvellous Miss Evie Lynch. So our focus is going to be one of the most prevalent myths surrounding veganism, and that is that vegans can't be athletes and athletes can't be vegan. Now obviously we don't think this is true, but we wanted to get some different perspectives on this. So in today's episode we're going to be interviewing long-term vegan athlete and ninja warrior Mr. Tim Shieff. And in part 2, we'll be interviewing media mogul and the creator of the London Reel show, Brian Rose, who's taking on his first endurance event powered entirely by a vegan diet. So I really hope you guys enjoy the interviews, and let's get on with the first one. Our guest on today's episode is Mr. Tim Shieff. Tim is one of the vegan movement's most recognisable and successful athletes. But in my opinion, just as importantly, he's also an advocate for ethical veganism and living, in general, a more mindful lifestyle. Two-time free-running world champion, Tim is now known to millions of people all over the world as a competitor on the TV show Ninja Warrior. He originally took part in the American version of the show, and in the first season of Ninja Warrior UK, Tim was crowned last man standing, which basically means he was the champ. And as you may have heard, a couple of weeks ago, Tim made UK Ninja Warrior history when he became the first man to be crowned last man standing for a second time when he won the 4th season of the show. In 2015, Tim founded the vegan clothing brand ETHCS. And when he was asked why he wanted to found a vegan clothing company, he said, "If I have to wear clothes, I want to wear ethical clothing in line with my beliefs." Hear, hear. So with that said, I think it's about time we get into this interview with Evie and Tim. So firstly, thanks for joining us, Tim.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, thank you for coming on. You're in the middle of a fast at the moment, right?
I am, yeah. 10 days into a water-only fast.
Unreal.
It's unreal for me too. If you asked me this a month ago, I would never have believed I could get this far. But the things we fear that call us often are the things we got to turn to eventually.
I'm so inspired by this. I really want to read more, but I just keep thinking of when I did a sugar cleanse and I was the moodiest.
Oh, you were horrible.
Just witch, can I say?
You can get it all out in one.
Yeah.
Like if you drink coffee, sugar,
Yeah.
bread, all these stuff. If you just
Everything's
fast, all in one go, deal with it.
Oh my
It's
God.
not that intense, and you feel better for it.
So listeners, if there's a loud thump, it's because Tim just fell over and we're running to get him medical attention. So yeah.
No, you're looking good.
Don't worry about that.
That's strong.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously this episode is about vegan athletes. And in terms of the vegan community, you've been described as the vegan prince.
Yeah.
By our friend Brian Rose.
Oh, nice one.
So yeah, you're kind of the go-to man. So with that in mind, how did you come to veganism?
Yeah, so 6 years ago now, in 2012, about September, I was away with a friend and he'd been vegetarian his whole life, and I'd never really ever actually thought about it, like never considered it, never gathered what it actually meant in any way. And for some reason, he just got me to try a week. And so I started to try a week, and I tweeted, I think at the time, I was going vegetarian for a week, and someone must have sent me a Gary Yourofsky talk, and then I watched that while I was tidying my room, and I just kept pausing, like, whoa, like these truth bombs just kept coming, and then it saw the footage of how the cows were treated, and that was a real shock for me then, and that was just a real game-changing moment for me. But other than that, there's other moments in my life which I look back on, and it's like, I remember one like wet autumn night walking into my house, and walking from the car into the front door, and I felt a crunch under my foot. And I was like, oh, not again, I've trodden a snail.
Yeah.
And we've done this throughout our lives, but every few years or whatever, you feel a crunch under your foot and you go, there's a snail, and you feel bad for the snail and it's sort of guilt. And I'm like, come on, Tim, if you're just mindful, watch where you go, and you wouldn't have trodden a snail, go inside, bit of cheese, bit of ham, make a sandwich, eat it. No consideration for the cheese, And it's like, how have I got any right to feel a guilt for the snail, which was a complete accident? I didn't mean to do it. And yet I'm consciously choosing to do this thing which harms animals, that I'm paying to support that. I'm paying someone to harm animals, but I feel bad if I'm faced and confronted with what I've just done.
Yeah.
And once I made that sort of hypocritical,
you made that night.
Yeah, it was like a moment then, and then linked with the other stuff, it was like boom. I was
wow.
Wow.
like,
I am envious of that. I never had that kind of moment. I think I just all my life felt bad about it deep down, and knew it was wrong. So, but yeah, amazing to hear, because I know, and we've talked to a lot of people on this show who've like had that awakening.
You've probably got moments like that like in your history. Like I went fishing with my dad, and
Yeah.
they'd catch mackerel on the way out, and then they'd get them in and beat them in the boat. And I was just like, oh yeah, is that what we're doing? And you just sort of like accept it as the people around you. But looking back, I was like, there was a part of me that was a bit disgusted by it.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you changed to veganism?
So I'm 30 now, just turned 30
Sick.
last month, and so 24.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the fishing one. I've got a few of those memories
Yeah.
because my dad and I didn't really have anything in common much. So we went. He builds yachts, so we went sailing, and
Amazing.
fishing was kind of the thing that was the only time I ever felt like I was, excelling in his eyes. And so yeah, I remember this one particular time I was maybe 5 or 6, and we caught this big old bass. And I was so happy at catching the thing and holding it, posing for my mum, and then him battering it with the mallet. I just sort of, I was like, okay, that's the reward.
It took a bit of your compassion for life and what respect.
It did,
yeah.
and it was kind of, it was that weird dissonance where someone's praising you for something that you've just done, but you're feeling bad about that thing that they're now doing.
It's our job to change that. Each generation's job to be more ethical than the last. And
I love that. That's really nice. Yeah. And because you were already an athlete at that point, did you worry about the effect going vegan would have on your career?
I've always been quite independent and sovereign in my choices. And like for me, and even if it made me less of an athlete, I would still have done it. Like I couldn't continue to have that awareness and support it, even if I was weaker. I'm lucky I'm in a sport that's not like defined by metrics where it's like running or weightlifting where it's like, oh, you could see your chart go down.
Yeah.
I'm in a sport where it's about creativity a bit more and free flowing. And actually within a few days I felt better. I had knee injuries previously and surgeries, and every winter they'd start to ache, and straight away they felt less bad. It's to do with the inflammation from the food.
Sure.
Even though I wasn't eating like the healthiest vegan, I was still eating like peanut butter and stuff, and falafel, but it was still way better than the meat alternatives that I was eating before. And so straight away I started to feel better, sleep better, more focused, all the stuff people hear about. And it's generally that there's one direction of healing. It's not like that this ingredient is giving you something you weren't before. So it's like, no, you're doing less damage to your body, so therefore you're rising to more healing.
And in those days, for anyone who doesn't know, that was parkour.
Yeah, parkour free running. That was, and I was world champion twice.
Yeah, so that was kind of how you sort of were introduced to the vegan community as a parkour athlete.
Yeah.
But now you've sort of transitioned into just general vegan athlete, right?
Yeah. I was quite. What happened with that was I became quite outspoken in the community because I thought this community, it felt like a very spiritual practice to me, and veganism, of course, can be quite a spiritual connection.
Yeah.
I thought, I'm going to, wow, when I let these guys know the information that I know, they're all going to understand and we'll get it. And, and little did I know.
Yeah, shock horror.
Sort of a mixed bag, but yeah, more got it than in hindsight. I'm actually quite proud of how many people got it, but at the same time, I got the divide, and I ended up just being this like self-righteous guy in the community, in their opinion. Right. And I was like, you know what? I'm not getting support from these guys in the vegan community who are really supportive, loved that I'd come across and sort of evolved to that level. And were really supportive. And I was like, you know what, these guys, maybe this is what these guys are supporting me and making me feel loved. This is where I'm for now. And so my parkour is more for them. I've done enough in the parkour world. I've given them. I don't need to continue to, go to that well. I've got a new community. Let me work with these guys and see what we can create.
That's so cool, because lots of people, the sort of the common idea about the vegan community is it's hateful and militant, very angry and not welcoming. Yeah, not welcoming for new people. I love that you realized that actually it was full of love, and particularly for the way you wanted to spread your message. We needed that.
It's like a castle, and on the inside is this big lovely bubble. But you've got to cross a certain
there's a drawbridge.
Bridge of compassion to get into it. Otherwise, you're on the outside, you're getting attacked.
Yeah,
bridge of compassion.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Yeah, and there's vegan sharks swimming around the castle.
Yeah, fight you. Come on.
Okay, all right. So, so the parkour was obviously what got the YouTube and the platform and a chance to talk to everyone.
Exactly.
But these days, people would associate with a certain TV show, Ninja Warrior.
Yes.
So how did the transition from parkour athlete, free runner to, I don't know, what is it, Ninja Warrior? Which are you? Ninja or Warrior?
Yeah, there is obviously quite a clear, for anyone that knows the show Ninja Warrior, there's quite a clear overlap with parkour. But it is still a very different practice. And I actually I was in Venice Beach and I have American citizenship. And it was in America like 4 or 5 years before it was on the UK.
Yep.
And they allowed me to compete, and I competed in Venice Beach. Did all right.
Sweet.
Did a couple of years there. Made the final in Vegas, and then I competed ended up being on the European team in an American special episode versus the yeah. And then eventually it came to the UK, and I thought, save myself the trip across the pond to just, you're risking falling in on the first hurdle. You've flown all that way to drop in 5 seconds. Yeah, so, took a little extra pressure off. Competed in the UK with a bit of experience behind me, and, it's a really good outlet for me to test myself, because there's something you get in Ninja Warrior that you can't access in parkour. Yes, in parkour, there's life or death moments, right? Yeah. But where you have to be very focused, calculated, have some faith. There's a fear there, but you know that it's not really based on your own capabilities. Mm-hmm. And it's just that voice from your mum in your head or something like that. But so that's a very good practice for that area. But also Ninja Warrior is like, there's TV cameras, a crowd, your family in the audience, the lights, there's other people competing that might want you to do well and not do well. And to put yourself in that moment when you don't get to say when you jump, they say go. Do you know what I mean? It's like a very unique challenge as a human. And I do enjoy watching like MMA and UFC and stuff, and I see what those guys do. And it's not in any way the same level of like throwing your body, putting your body through that thing, but it's the chance for me to train, to put in my training into practice, have a key moment that you're training for. And get up and turn up and test yourself. And it's not just about your physical ability on the course. It's how you can deal with it mentally, emotionally as well. And it's really that stuff like that helps me grow as a human being. It helps to dissolve my ego and understand myself through that.
Because it's pressure. That's the acid test, right?
That's that you can't get in the gym.
No. Yeah, man, that's so cool. And of course, you've been climbing over that bridge of compassion already, so you're really good at scaling obstacles. So that's
when
cool.
Are you going to compete?
No, when so you're a couple of years younger than me. When I was little, I used to watch a show called Gladiators. Right. So
it's a modern version. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like the 7-year-old me was making obstacle courses around the house, pretending Jet was somewhere off there that I could go and see Jet.
Wolf. Could be that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's like a modern version. It's slightly less aggressive as well, because it's not you against another human. No, it's you against the course.
Yeah,
which I really like, because I think often in sports, when it's you versus someone, there's always a loser.
Yeah.
Whereas with that, there's no losers. There's only someone that does the best on the course. So it's a more fair form of competition that I don't mind, adhering to. Parkour is very transferable to that stuff. I think if you just train Ninja Warrior, you can become quite stiff. But the parkour background, and I started to get into rock climbing and yoga about 5 years ago as well. And those really helped me just to understand my body more, keep it in tune. And that's sort of a trifecta for me, was parkour, yoga and rock climbing, and it just works so well for Ninja Warrior.
Yeah.
I love how what I get from you is that you're so in touch with your body, because so many people are really disconnected. And I think a lot of people that they find that out in their adult life, that they really need to reconnect. And just from you doing your fast and doing all these competitions, you have such a fine connection. I wondered, did you notice when you went vegan, do you feel it kind of gives you an edge as an athlete?
Yeah, absolutely. It trimmed away all the nonsense in my body. I think the food we consume, humans are amazing survival creatures, so we can consume these foods. If it was an ice age and you need to eat seals or something, you can consume it and get through and you'll survive. But for optimum performance, it's you're living in the tropics with fresh fruit and vegetables, and your body, there's less fat on that food, and you've got an abundance, so your body's not trying to store fat. And it just helps to fuel you. And all these greens are high in protein anyway, so there's no real drama. And I don't take any supplements, any protein powders or anything like that. I trust. It's trusting nature, man. It's like I've got this faith, and who knows, in 10 years comes to bite me in the butt. But I feel like I'm fairly balanced with my choices, and I look around and I'm like, well, I'm doing all right compared to most people. So
mate, if you're up there on the 3rd floor of the hospital, I'm going to be right next to you. I'll be alongside you, because if you're going down, then we're all going down together.
Yeah, man. Or we end up in a Garden of Eden somewhere,
Yeah, that would be a nice
one. Way or the other.
Yeah, one way or the other, we'll be there together. So which way, what's the reaction from the other athletes that you're around? Obviously, the Ninja Warrior community is a really tight community. Everyone knows each other. They now all know you're a vegan. But what was their reaction when you first kind of came on the scene and they realised that you were entirely plant-based?
It's really interesting, actually, because the first season I was vegan, and I asked the crew on set, they were providing meals, can you get me vegan meals? And they wouldn't do it. They refused, which was quite upsetting. But this is 4 years ago. Now you'd think like, oh, come on, like every shop supermarket.
Yeah.
4 years ago, not
this was the American one.
The English one.
Ah, the English one. Okay, I was going to say in Venice Beach, you can't go anywhere.
America, they always catered for me. English one, not so much. Which was quite upsetting. The second year, they provided vegan meals. There were a lot more vegans, like people that I'd met on there came back the next year. Hey, I'm vegan now, and that was really cool.
Amazing.
And then season 4 just went by, and I was raw vegan. I went raw from May until October.
Oh, sweet.
And it was filmed.
That's basically the competition kind of season, right?
Yeah, it was filmed in August. So I didn't actually go raw for the show.
Okay.
I didn't know I was on the show until 3 weeks before.
Oh man!
So I didn't even get that much time to train. But I was raw, and I went there and I said, "I'm raw fruit, mostly fruitarian now. I know you provide vegan food. Can you get me some fruit?" They refused again.
What?
Yeah, I mean,
they couldn't get you fruit.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into the. There's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that I'm quite not happy with, and I've done a video on my YouTube that talks more about it, because it's the UK show. It's not on the surface. It looks like, yes, great, they're supporting Ninja Warrior athletes, which is good, but there's a lot of politics behind the scenes where it's still very much just a TV show and not about the athletes, and that upsets me, because I see the heart and passion of these other athletes. But for me, it's just a side project. I make my own money. I'm sovereign.
Sure.
I don't rely on it for media, but I'm grateful for it, for the platform it gives me. For people like you reaching out and seeing, and it represents veganism. And that last series was really good for that. And they mention it. They use my, I mention it in every interview, but they actually used it
for once.
So
and you got the tea and everything, like it's all out there.
But when there's certain things that I'm like, what, that's where you need to be mindful, and you're not being mindful, so we're not quite aligned. But
that's the important thing. People should know the motives and the ethos behind the programs that they watch, because so many people sit down and they absorb those messages that come out of their TV, and they never think to question them. We'll put a link to that video on YouTube in the show notes, so listeners, if you're interested in that, you should be check it out.
Yeah, full honest feedback and review, and it's my duty to sort of speak out, because other people would speak, but then no one's really going to listen as much. In my position of last man standing, if I'm not speaking, it's a job for me. So.
Right. Okay. So you just mentioned a phrase there that I want to expand upon a little bit. Last man standing. Mm-hmm. Tell us what that means.
Yeah, for Ninja Warrior. Yeah. So I basically, last man standing was and this is the second season I've done it, that I've got the furthest on the course. So you have the first heats, which I got through in the fastest time. The semi-finals I got through, and at that point, if you don't complete the course, you're not through. So complete the semi-finals, and you have about 30 competitors left. Final stage 1, again, if you don't complete, you're not through. 8 competitors completed that. We went on to stage 2, and then it goes stage 2 and 3 are back to back, and I think about 5 people completed stage 2, including myself. And then stage 3, I got the furthest on stage 3 to the very last obstacle, the last bar. And if I was to complete stage 3, you go to stage 4, which is a 22-meter rope climb. Yeah. So I was 1 bar away from getting to the rope climb.
Yeah. And had you prepared for the rope climb?
I hadn't done a single rope climb.
Good lad.
It was a funny thing, because everyone's like, did you fall on purpose? Did you lose focus? I think my subconscious made me fall at that moment. Right. Because if I was to have completed it, my plan, if I got to the rope, and they sort of expected me at that point to get there, once I got that far, people will have high expectations for me. Yeah. My plan was to stand under, close my eyes, and hope to levitate to the top. I don't practice rope climbing. It's not fun. It's not on my daily routine. No. If I had more notice to Ninja Warrior, then maybe I'd practice. If there was prize money, maybe I'd practice. Yeah. Because then it's some incentive. But at this point, last man standing is as good as completing. It is. It's as good as completing. Yeah. It represents the same way.
You're the winner one way or the other.
Either way. So my job was done, So I got out the water. I was
listen,
perfect.
For all of us who wanted to see you levitate, I'm slightly disappointed.
If it was live, it was more likely to happen.
All right. Okay. So next time the levitation is going to occur.
You can watch the TV and be like, go on.
I have a question.
Go on.
Because obviously with your platform, you must get so many people looking at you being like, I want to do that. I want to be vegan doing that. So like, what do you say to athletes who come to you and say, how do I be vegan? Like, how do I do it? Yeah.
People do approach me on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube and stuff like that. To be honest, I don't have the best advice. I've sort of moved on. Like I leave that to other people like Nimai, and then like these guys have like focused on the micros and macros. Like I'm always on the next wave. Like I became vegan 5-6 years ago, moved on from things, and it's like, cool, I've done that now. I'm more onto the raw stuff. I'm more onto letting go of gains so much. Like I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone. I'm just focused on myself. So I mean, I send people to people like Nimai and that. We made a cookbook, vegan cookbook with my company ETHCS. So we've got food recipes which are all fairly clean whole food recipes. So there's things like that to send them to. Or Dr. Gregor, do you know Dr. Gregor as well? Yeah, people like him. Really, if you want science for your answer, then go to them. I'm off in other realms now.
Nice.
Within those other realms, just out of curiosity, what's your diet and training? I mean, obviously not at the moment, and if it's going to pain you to talk about food, you don't have to. But I'm just curious, what's an average day of training and food like?
So doing a lot more yoga lately.
Yeah.
I feel like all the training I did from parkour from years has sort of built my base and my understanding and awareness of my body, and then the yoga just sharpens me. So it's this. There's that saying, if you had an hour to cut down a tree, spend 55 minutes sharpening your blade. And so it's like that. So yoga's just sharpening my blade. Like the body knows what it wants to do. And it's just all about freeing, similar to you mentioned Ido Portal earlier, about freeing the body, freeing the joints, and then tapping into that. As a child, we all moved with that sort of great, graceful mobility and awareness, and sort of getting back to that is within all of us. So a lot of my practice is yoga. A lot of my food is raw fruits and then steamed vegetables, lots of steamed greens and potatoes.
And that's so you can perform at your best, the raw food, or is that
so I can
spiritual?
feel my best. So I can feel my best. Yeah.
Wow.
It's purely feeling healthy and happy first, and then the performance comes after.
And how does raw food, does it like affect your mood and your thinking and everything?
So much. Just one of the biggest things, apart from feeling a lot looser in my body, is just emotionally way more balanced.
Right.
Like, especially with veganism, and here's something I think it's important to address within veganism is you can become so emotionally attached to eating. Like I wasn't really a foodie until I became vegan.
Yeah, same.
Because you have that emotional attachment to, yes, this is doing good for the planet. This is important, guys. Come for a vegan meal with me. Oh my God, isn't this vegan burger amazing? This pizza is vegan. Did you? It's like we go through all of that and we don't really stop to think, actually, listen to my body. I started to feel as bad as I felt before. You get this new level of awareness. And then you step back, and I've had moments like probably 4 years ago, I went to the Woodstock Fruit Festival. From veganism, you start to look at the raw food movement, and there's pros and cons with that movement, and there's right and wrong ways to do that as well with anything. Yeah. As you get through each scale and level, there's more traps than ever. So it's like you have to really navigate consciously. And so I'm constantly moving on to the next one. So I went to the raw vegan movement, and then I sort of came back, and I was like, you know what? Living in London and veganism starting to boom, and I've you got YouTube and Instagram, and I started to enjoy all the vegan fast foods again and greasy stuff, and it's like you get carried away with that again, and I'm like, you know what, I'm not actually feeling that good in my body, and it's like it's just this back and forth of learning and growing and sort of letting that go, and we all can get quite, like I say, emotionally attached to what veganism is and stop listening to our bodies and realizing that the journey is for us, not for the people around us. And it's like I became vegan because of self-reflection, not because of someone telling me go vegan. No. Nice. So for me to then tell everyone go vegan, it's like, no, just work on yourself. Wherever that leads you to, eventually I trust it's going to lead to veganism. Yeah. But just to help them work on themselves.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, I believe that really strongly. And it's a really interesting cycle that you go through. It seems like you find something to immerse yourself in. You immerse yourself in it until it becomes something that you identify with, and then you smash the identity within you of that thing and then move on to the next one.
Acid alkali. Making diamonds.
Hey, that's such an interesting way to live. That's blown my mind. Okay, so within sort of the training regime and the yoga and all of the work that you do, where are you moving?
Who knows? I'm just trusting the universe right now. It's a weird one. I'm not really. Like I say, it's all just focused on self, and then wherever that takes me. Often people have vision boards and write your goals down and your intentions and stuff like that, and it's like I've never been that drawn to it. Yeah. And the more I've just focused on myself and getting myself into a good place of happiness and feeding the things that I enjoy, but then at the same time you have to identify what is true joy out of purity and what is joy from attachment. So one thing to identify that is when it comes to food, if you put a vegan burger and fries in front of me, there'll be a joy, right? But if you put a watermelon in front of me on another day, there'll also be a joy. But internally, I feel them as different. The burger is feeding that an emotional attachment to the burger, or it feeds my taste buds, but not actually feeling my body's best interests.
Right.
But a watermelon is a joy that's like a child coming out of me. Do you know what I mean? You give fruit to a child, and they're really it's genuine joy for that. And
How do you tell the difference?
It's on you to discover. But it's just an internal dialogue of like the purity, the soul, and the ego. You know, and one's for the soul, one's for the ego. And that's as you get higher on the quest. It's like you learn to decipher the two. The difference between the soul and the ego is really the journey. So so continuing to just focus on myself, and then wherever that takes me, as long as I'm in a happy place, I attract other things that feed to my joy. You know, when I'm just trying to highlight, I need to be here at this moment, and I'm chasing that. It's like then I'm like starting to rush, and it's like, don't rush. Make sure you're good day to day, and then everything flourishes from that.
It feels like your journey is such a, I don't know if this is even the right way to put it, but a spiritual kind of quest. The way you talk about going up, going higher onto the next.
I've never met somebody who so much tends to, like the mind, body, spirit trio. You know, people tend to be imbalanced on either like one of them.
Is the key,
It's
all about positive vibes, or is that balance vibe.
Have you always had a spiritual connection?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. I think it's just buried within us because school doesn't really, it's like I've been at school and feeling certain ways, and now I look back, I'm like, that was all because I should have been in like a spiritual guided path. But but really it wasn't until I came across Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it was A New Earth.
Yes.
That book.
That is the best freaking book. Everyone talks about Power of Now.
Exactly.
But A New Earth,
A New Earth's the real one because it's about the ego, right?
Yeah.
And because of The New Earth, I was able to understand myself. And there was I've had like 2 Great Depressions in my adulthood.
Yeah.
And that was the first one stemmed from A New Earth, which was all for the good in the long run.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it was the breaking down of the self, the dissolving of the ego, the understanding that. And so from that sort of veganism came maybe a year or 2 later, but I was ready to accept veganism because I understand myself.
Yeah.
So it was probably about 8 years ago I discovered that, and I went to see him live last year, which was really cool.
He's got a creepy voice.
Yeah.
I tried to listen to the audiobook and I was like,
scared. That's
you
funny.
still have my copy of
I do. Well, that was what our very first conversation was ever. The first time we ever sat down offset away from Potter and nothing to do with Potter was at a little cafe in LA, and we just talked about A New Earth for a while.
And now we're here.
So you obviously like have such a like self-knowledge, and you're that's your guiding path, like your intuition. You so are connected to that. But do you have any heroes otherwise, like people who inspire you, and who are they?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I started to realize more lately that the heroes should be people that we're connected with around us, like that you can see on a weekly, monthly basis. And that's because then that's how it was in the history before TV and stuff like that. It would be like, it's not about the fastest guy on TV. It's about the fastest guy in your village.
Yeah,
that guy. Yeah, exactly. And you can relate to them more, and you can learn from them and build rather than trying to be Usain Bolt. You're like, so from that, like people like my cousin, who's an amazing mountain runner. But yeah, in terms of that, of course, I still have attachments to people on the internet and that. So people like Kilian Jornet, who's one of the best mountain runners in the world, and then Conor McGregor. And I'd say from an athletic standpoint, like I mentioned to you earlier, the best of fight and the best of flight, the best runner and the best fighter. And those are my 2 biggest sort of physical inspirations, and look up to them for mental outlets, for the way they train and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Connor needs to go on a fast.
Connor, when he's ready, I'm here, brother. Like, some spiritual journey, because when he turns to the spiritual side and understands the real games of life,
he puts that together.
Yeah. When he puts it together, and there's a lot. That's why one of the reasons I watch UFC. And people say, "Why do you watch it? It's violent," but I just see warriors, right?
Yeah.
And when some of these guys, like Robert Whittaker, recently, he's one of them. Rose Namajunas.
Yep.
When they put their mind and they understand the real games going on in the world, and they start to translate it towards that and push for that, then we will have a real mass change on the planet, on Earth, right?
Yes.
So I watched them in fighting, and I just think in 5-10 years, they're going to join the quest that we're all on, veganism, and see there's a bigger picture to be played.
Yeah.
And they enter that realm, then it's going to be, and so people like Connor, I'm just waiting for him to connect all the dots, because he's having all the money, all the fame, and he'll realize eventually, like Russell Brand, it's not what you're after.
Exactly. Yeah. He'll come to a real,
and then he'll be like, and we'll be here waiting.
In our very first half-hour Meet the Chickpeeps episode, we were asked who our favourite person to go vegan. If we could snap our things and make anyone vegan, and Connor, like we were both fighting
you
to
said
see.
Connor?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we were both trying to get vegan. on
say
around.
Russell
Yeah.
then. He's
No,
almost
he's
there.
yeah, he's
Jamie Oliver would be a good one.
yeah, Jamie Oliver would be a
Yeah.
really good one. And then that's
He's
the
flirting
thing.
with it.
But yeah, so there's that thing of the way, and this is something else I really like about the way you exist within the community, is today the idea that vegan as a word turns people off is still prevalent within the wider community, and yet you've never been afraid of saying, no, I'm vegan, not plant-based.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of athletes, like Tom Brady and Leo Messi, the Williams sisters, they if
never
they
sure.
do it, they do it and they call it plant-based.
Yeah.
They don't want to say the V word.
Yeah.
Whereas you've never been shy about
It's
that.
more important than your game, than your silly sport. Like,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
more
yeah.
important is who you are as a human and what you stand for. And
Yeah.
these guys, it's not their fault. They're caught up in a game with a lot of money, so they feel that's more important.
Sponsors and all that stuff.
Yeah, so
but-
they feel that they have to be careful with it, and I'm never going to be dictated to by my sport or by other things other than my own beliefs.
And I mean, I also think that's kind of the point for people who get to that, whose God-given talents and hard work elevate them to that position. They then I feel almost, and I can say this because I'm not in that position, almost have that responsibility to share that with their people,
If you look at history, the ones who stand out are the ones that did it. The ones that aren't afraid to speak what's the real truth.
Mate, that's such a cool place to leave this interview. So, for all of our listeners at home, you just made a lot of fans. Where can they follow you?
Yeah, my Instagram's probably the main thing, @humantimothy.
Yep.
Pretty simple. YouTube, just search Tim Shieff. And I've got a second channel, I Feel Truth, which is a little more the spiritual side of things.
That's very cool.
I'm documenting my fast on that channel.
Oh, nice.
Amazing.
Cool. And you don't know when you're going to finish it?
No, at the moment, I'm debating between 21 and 40 days.
Oh my God.
But the key to anything is just starting. Like this, if I said to myself I'm going to do 21 days, I'd be terrified before I start. I was like, just do 7. And I began with 36 hours, 48 hours, and I was like, right. I felt so good from those just alone. I was like, what can 7 days do? Booked out 7 days, did that. At the end of it, did a lot more research. Was like, you know what? I'm in this now. My body's just getting to the deep healing.
Yeah.
Let's carry this on as long as we can.
Deep healing. Wow.
But yeah,
And you're talking about all that on your YouTube channel.
Yeah, all that's on my YouTube.
good. Yeah, you're vlogging the whole
I Feel
thing.
Truth. Yeah.
Good. Yeah, listeners, if you are thinking about this, the key word in the sentence that Tim used was research. You do a lot of it, please. Because if you thought it was hard to explain to your parents about going vegan, it'll be even harder to explain to them about just drinking water.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being
Thank you,
on,
mate.
Tim. Especially
Thank you,
at
man.
this time.
Yeah, no
You
worries.
should just be lying horizontal and
Nah, it's all good. Thanks for
not
having me.
thinking.
Legend.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.